Well, hygiene is really the number one thing that people need to get through their mind, that it is very important to set the foundation stone in brewing. If we've got the foundation correct, then the beer will turn out really well. There's a lot of bugs or bacteria in the air that we see every day. When we're cooking food, we need to boil our food, we need to cook our chicken properly and all that. Beer is no different. We need to make sure that all our utensils are clean before we start, and that they've got a minimum amount of bacteria there as possible. So we're not talking about sterilisation, we're talking about sanitisation. Sanitisation basically is about keeping as much bugs out of the container that the beer is going to be in contact with. Well, in the old days, there was no concept of bacteria and bugs. In fact, a lot of the fermentations occurred by natural yeast that was floating in the air, and because the fermenters were open, the bacteria would go in there, or the wild yeast would go in there and start the fermentation process. So they didn't really have much of a concept about the bacteria side of it spoiling the beer, and in a lot of cases that did occur. And in fact, Louis Pasteur was the first person to discover this concept of bacteria, and he was employed by the wine and beer industry back then to try and look at this problem, why the beer and wine was spoiling. So it wasn't through so much the yeast, but it was really the bacteria that came along with it. What in the main we find is we can get what's called lactobacillus, which is a type of bacteria which will spoil your beer, make it sour. It becomes sour and very undrinkable. So most beers, we don't want this sourness in the beer. And in fact, it can be so off-putting if you're drinking a nice clean lager, for example, to have this sourness there. And so we really want to make sure we don't get to that stage. We don't want sour beer. Of course, there are the exceptions to the rule. These days we do make some lambic beers which are produced on purpose to be sour, but that's controlled and it's a specific type of beer. Well, the very first thing you have to do is make sure your equipment is nice and clean. So if you've just finished brewing and you have a fermenter of some sort, then this fermenter needs to be cleaned properly. We have to remove the soil properly in order to be able to sanitize that vessel for the next time that we use it. So we need to clean, and then we need to sanitize just before use. They're the two steps, the major steps we need to have a look at. Well, the first thing we would do is we'd use some sort of a cleanser, and you don't want to use dishwashing detergent or anything that's got a scent in it. We don't want lemon flavoured beers. So what we really want to do is use a non-scented proprietary type of cleanser, such as nappy sand, for example. Nappy sand is a very simple one that you can use from your laundry, and it doesn't have to cost the earth. I mean, you can go to your brew shop and they will supply the right product for you, which is fine. But most of them are based upon percarbonate, which is a cleanser which will remove the soil from the fermenter or from the vessel. And then once we've cleaned, we need to rinse. Make sure we do rinse all that residue off properly. And sometimes we need to use some sort of a sponge just to help us along to remove that soil. Never use a stainless steel scourer of any sort, because that will scratch the inside of the fermenter, and scratches are very bad for the next step, which is the sanitisation step. The removal of bacteria and wild yeast, up to not 100%, but pretty close to 100%, whereas sterilisation is actually the process where we remove all of that up to 100%. So we're not trying to get sterilisation, we're just trying to remove as much as possible, and so we call that sanitisation. If you're in a microbrewery, usually they use a two-step process because it just makes it a lot easier. They do clean their tanks with things like caustic soda to remove all the soil, and they will sterilise with hydrogen peroxide mixture of some sort, which is a very good sanitizer. It's an oxidant actually, and it actually kills all the bacteria and yeast upon contact. It depends if you're soaking it. If you're soaking it, obviously it has to come in contact with the liquid, so you really need to fill it up to the level of the soil, and that's about it really. And if you want to soak overnight, that's a good thing. And you can even do it like, for example, with nappy sand and warm water. Don't use hot water because it might react and form a bit of a gas, which is a little bit dangerous, so you don't want to be breathing that in. So just use warm water, fill it up to the level that you want, just to cover the soil. That's all you need to do. You don't have to go right up to the top.